Warning.
Warning.
Warning!
Now for a word of caution.
The information you are about to hear is the exact knowledge they don't want you to know. Only on the Bridge Podcast, hosted by Travis Haley.
That was awesome. I felt a little 80s Max Headroom in there.
I did the music myself.
Oh, I love it. Dig it.
Yeah.
Into it.
Yeah. Tyler, thanks for coming on, man.
Dude, honestly, thanks for having me. It's been great.
And I'm glad you're here. It's kind of a good week, right? It's Veterans Day coming up here. And so I think it'd be awesome because you've got an amazing insight and obviously an extremely colorful career and not just the military, but everything you're doing now. And I thought you could help me talk to not just the veterans, but families and people out there to maybe have a little bit better understanding of who we are in this world. And because I know you've done some films and trying to really attack that space and guys that are having trouble and gals that are having trouble as well, and trauma victims in general, right? It's not just about veterans. And I think that's what we always like to speak, because we have a problem with that. You know, like we go, well, you don't know what it's like to be in combat. Well, try telling that to a rape victim. You know, try telling that to a paramedic that sees babies in pieces every day on the side of the road. Like, don't try that.
A woman who lost her child.
Yeah, right. So, and being that, you know, I think it's a good time to lay into that. What's your thoughts first off on just Veterans Day in general? Because, you know, you hear like a lot of the cliche things like, oh, don't thank me, thank my family for, you know, my service and putting up with my shit and all that. So what's your take on that, man?
Man, that's a great question. I'll say this overall, not just about Veterans Day, but really my take on everything from my time in to how I view the military to how I view people still, everything continues to change, which is really weird to me. And, you know, I haven't really figured out how I feel. Like Veterans Day is a perfect example where, you know, I personally, I get uncomfortable with the, you know, people thanking me for my service. It makes me uncomfortable. That being said, I get uncomfortable with compliments or anything nice in general. So I guess it's not too far of a stretch, but specifically with Veterans Day, you know, there was a time maybe 2 years ago when if somebody said, hey, thank you for your service, I would say, oh, no, yeah, you don't need to thank me. I volunteered and I had a great time. And I 100% honestly meant that. But the responses that I would get, you know, it would be like, it's almost like, just say you're welcome and let's move on. It's like, hey, how you doing today at the grocery store? Like no one well, quite frankly, I've had a really shit day and, you know, haven't had a bowel movement. I'm just quite frankly constipated, which is why I'm here. No, it's just like, great. Thanks. You know, it's casual conversation. So, and then I kind of realized that by saying something other than, you know, oh, you're welcome, even though I thought in my head I was being, you know, I legitimately didn't join for anyone but myself. Mm-hmm. I joined because I wanted to join. I joined for absolutely selfish reasons. And so by saying, hey, I, you know, don't need to thank me, I truly meant that. But I just, I started realizing that it never came across right. And that's when I kind of just started. Now it's just like, you know, you're welcome.
I wonder if because people are uncomfortable as well that don't understand our world. And they come up because you know, somebody might introduce me to somebody, oh yeah, you know, they find out who I am or whatever. And they're like, oh, thank you for your service. You know, cause they don't know necessarily how to approach that either. Cause I've talked to some of them at length when I get to know them, like, hey, you know, what are your thoughts on this for real? And, it's uncomfortable for them because maybe they know that we joined because we're different. We are. It does take a special person to do that, just like it takes a special person to be a doctor, or it takes a special person to be a freaking rocket scientist or a sanitation engineer, which is a fancy way of saying garbage man. But they're uncomfortable with that because they know that about us. And so I think they're uncomfortable because they're like, yeah, but you're allowing me to be free. And so that's why I'm trying to thank you from the bottom of my heart And I don't know how, and we go, well, we don't need that because that's not why we signed up. When, I don't know, did we?
I specifically fought for the freedom for you to not have to thank me. True freedom is not having to thank a person.
Oh my God. Yeah.
No, but you know what I mean? It's one of those things. Or is it social pressure? Do they feel the social pressure that,
Sure.
that they feel the need socially to thank veterans for their service? And so, man, honestly, I don't know where I stand with it right now. I know that it makes me uncomfortable, but I know that I don't want to make other people uncomfortable. Like in my head, one thing I said a couple times was like, thank you for your service. I'm like, oh, you don't need to thank me. They paid me. Like I was paid, and it was a job. And so I don't know, man. I don't know. It's I don't know how to think about it right now, and it's it's hard to compare it to like something like Memorial Day, where it's easy, that is remembrance, and it's for people who aren't here. That just seems very cut and dry for me. It just seems very odd that I can be thanked and they can't. So maybe there's guilt there.
Yeah, because they, like we talked about earlier, they went all the way, and we have not yet in our lives. So that to me is a lot more owed gratitude and appreciation and the vet. So that's hard to understand for people out there, I think, that are trying to thank us, but we're like, look, we haven't gone all the way yet. So you don't need to thank us for shit.
It's not a comparable level. It's not a comparable level of sacrifice.
Yeah.
But again, that's probably what you and I believe and feel and know.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, that they're aware of that, of our perspective. So it's a strange, and then it's also like, how do I feel about veterans telling people Happy Veterans Day, thanking them for their service? It's like a weird, like I have no problem like thinking, like if I see like a Vietnam vet or someone not from, the wars we were in. Yeah. It's like, thank you for your service. And to me, I do that because, especially with Vietnam vets, because they didn't get that,
Right.
Yet if I saw some person wearing an Operation Enduring Freedom hat, I'd probably be like, not say anything. I don't know. It's just, I don't know where I stand.
Well, you maybe this is a good segue into this separation that we talked about, right? From thousands of years of warrior culture to hunter-gatherer concepts and how it all started to separate to where, gatherers like, hey, we got this, guys. You don't need to go out and hunt anymore. And we're like, patience my ass. I'm going to kill something. That's what we do. That's what we're designed to do, which people don't understand that. And so I think, that gap is starting to, like from Vietnam on, we're still in that world a little bit. And, I find myself doing these default style answers to people. Oh, thank you for your service. And I'm like, yeah, I loved and hated every second of it. And it makes them go, oh, well, I'm not going to ask any more questions, but they get, hey, it's a double-edged sword being in the military or serving in any capacity, really.
The analogy that I now use about the military is it's a toxic relationship, but the sex is really good.
Yeah, I think we can all understand that.
I think we definitely can. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like absolutely toxic. You guys just clash. It's a fucking war. But
we love it.
But
we can't
when it's
get
good,
enough of it.
When it's good, sex is really good. We
always come home to it.
And that's the thing is dude, I've personally stayed in relationships for years because of that one factor. And probably combined,
because you like the chaos to clarify that.
Yeah, I was just about to say probably because in addition to that, I really just crave the chaos, the absolute nuclear explosion that relationships like that can be on a daily basis. There was a time where, if during a date, I detected a lack of father issues, there was no second date, so I'm totally joking, by the way.
I just got that.
Totally kidding.
That had to
totally
sink
kidding.
To the first 3 or 4 layers. A lack of father issues.
A lack of father
You are
issues.
out of here.
Oh, I got a text. It's my dad. Oh, you guys have a great relationship? Yeah, and he's great.
Yeah, goodbye.
Have a good one. But man, it is, I don't think you could define how I feel about the military, both then and now, and, from getting out till now, more than it's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
Or the other analogy I could use, it's like a dad who never tells you do a good job. You're always kind of like trying to get the, attaboy, good work. And
you're not going to get it.
You're never going to get it,
And I think that makes us silent too. Like go back to the silent versus quiet concept. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that more in depth a little bit here from now. But this, it was Bertoni one time asked me, she goes, why are you guys so freaking like silent about what you do, like this whole bullshit silent warrior thing? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we don't need praise. And she's like, well, yeah, I noticed that around your birthday. I noticed that around holidays. I noticed that around a lot of things. You're like, yeah, don't get me shit. I don't need anything. Like, just, I'm good. Right. And it was this, like, I have to be in that world because, in special operations, as you know, when we typically come home from a deployment, there are no parades. There are no, my teams never actually got to cross the beach and have the families come running out to us and the jets flying overhead and all that shit, which every deployment in the Marine Corps most likely does that when they come home. Hey, they hail and farewell you away and they receive you back in with love and flags and, kids running across the tarmac to their pilot dads and moms getting out of their aircraft. And like, we just get on a bus and go back to our barracks. We dump our shit and we go home. And so we start to believe that that's how we're supposed to live life. And I think that traumatizes people. I really do. And to a point where you say that the rest of your life, when the military is not my entire life. It's only about maybe, well, for me, 15 years of total time served. What about the rest of the 60 other years or 70 other years, hopefully, that I live? Like, that shouldn't define everything in that moment. And I realized I started doing that. And she would start saying, no, you guys deserve more than that. You deserve to be celebrated. And what do? I argue. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. But maybe there's something to that, because it does traumatize people and they get so quiet inside. And then this bullshit bravado, fake anti-Shakti and Shiva, divine masculine and feminine anti-warrior comes out. When true warriors in the past, what did they do? They shared everything and they were celebrated every single fucking time they came home from combat. For a reason, because they were appreciated for what they did. And I think with what you said earlier, with that separation of the warrior and the two societies,
war has always been at the same level of suck. Society used to be at the same level of suck as war, and now the gap is ridiculously wide.
Yeah,
life is very easy, and war still sucks.
100 years ago in this country, sucked.
Yeah.
It sucked. It was horrible.
Yeah. It's tough.
You try to cross a state and you'd be a different person 10 years later. By the time you cross just the state, let alone the entire country, half your family's dead at that point. So I think we forget that. And society doesn't accept us anymore, where back then it was just a normal thing to, right?
Yeah. I mean, and again, I'll do what I do best, which is go personal. I used to think that and what Travis was referring to was, I have a saying, which is that we should be quiet, not silent. And for whatever reason, well, for many reasons, I think it's evolved more into silent professionals, not quiet professionals. If you're silent, no one, you can't help. If we didn't do this conversation, no one could learn from it. So we're being quiet, but we're not being silent. But why do I think I was silent? I don't think it had anything to do with the military. I think it had to do with what put me in the military to begin with. Fundamentally as a child, I didn't think I was special. I didn't think I was worth a shit. Like, I had no value as a kid. I was, alone most of the time. I had 2 imaginary friends, and I didn't think I was worth anything. I got picked on a lot, and even by the people who I was friends with, if I was in that group, one person's picked on, and it was me. Why? Because I was a sensitive kid. I was a sensitive, nice kid, and I basically was like, I'll show you. Watch what I do. And even though I, did go somewhere that, is, supposed to be all these different things, and externally I was those things, but internally I wasn't. I was still the kid not worth a shit. So
even in the job you were doing, you're saying?
Even in the job. So I think the reason when I got out of the military, I was silent and couldn't take compliments and wouldn't, talk about anything, I did that was, maybe, good or anything like that. It's because, quite frankly, I didn't think I did anything special. And how could I? I wasn't special. I think that was always there. And I think that applies to a lot more than just myself, based on my experience with talking to people.
Do you still feel that way about yourself?
I did up until about a year. And a half ago. And by the way, I didn't know, obviously consciously, that I felt that way. And it wasn't until, I really, I really got forced to do about 60 days of continuous daily therapy. And I was taken out of my environment, or out of daily life. And I was, in a place where all I was doing every day was therapy and, personal growth and all that stuff. And then getting down to the root cause on a lot of behaviors I had made me realize that I actually had an extremely low opinion of myself, which was hilarious because, my life was, now and then was pretty good. Externally, it's like I had all these great things. Externally, I could point to, I look at the value I have. Look at my friends. Look at all these things. But none of that translated into how I felt about myself internally. And when I realized that consciously, when it went from subconscious to conscious, it was then that I was able to start changing it. And then the problem is knowing something. Okay, knowing something's great, but knowing something and accepting something are 2 very different things. I knew it. I knew I was worth something, but I had a lot of trouble accepting it. And it took me a while to accept it. And quite frankly, I'd say I'm 50% of the way on accepting. I definitely know, like, in some things I'm the shit, but like logically, I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. But I'm still really, there's also a difference between knowing what I'm good at and then fundamentally feeling special and feeling worth it, or worth something. I spent, a lot of my life just thinking that nothing was unique and nothing was special. Everything's replaceable, so it's just, I've basically been having to try and reconcile, 45 years of beliefs with a new paradigm of how I view the world and how I view myself, more importantly. So to wrap that up though, I don't think it was the military that kept me silent. It was my own concept of self-worth.
Wow, that's interesting. That's deep. So there's a big self-reflection there that you had in this therapy, it sounds like, or this process that you went through. That is some type of reflection or actualization but you mentioned 50% there. Like what is the thing that transformed you to get that 50% that you got? And then what is it that you need to find the next 50% to be completely open and on that springboard of growth moving forward? Because I think that a lot of guys, I have that problem too, man. I'm speaking to the choir here. And I think a lot of guys have that same issue. It's like we find little bits and pieces, but then it's hard for us to accept, keyword, because I think we're resisting something, you know, and that's the hard part, is to find what is it that you're resisting, and we may not know. And I've worked with a lot of mind architects on this concept where, if you can create this trust, which is hard, and you know, like I'm a pelican case, right? So like a pelican case of trust, that I have to believe that no matter what adversity that I'm going through, whether it's any of those traumas we mentioned earlier, that I don't understand why I'm, you know, going through this right now. Like I'm sure you've said in your life at certain points, like, fuck, why me? You know, why not you? Who else has the grit and the perseverance and the resilience to get through this? Some people don't. Some people can't live through the pain of just trying to learn how to heal from something. And I think it's because they resisted, and resistance is the precursor or bedfellow to suffering. And so, you know, if you take that quintessential person that lost their job, you know, basic, simple life traumas, to all of a sudden, you know, losing a child, losing a family member, losing a brother, sister, car accident, a rape victim, a chronic, you know, exposure to these horrible, terrible traumas that we see in our lives. And you don't understand why you're seeing all those things, even though you probably manifested it, right? We put ourselves in those situations, and then we're not taught how to deal with them. So like, if you can realize, I think we all can understand, everything naturally settles into its place, right? Eventually. So if you went through something bad yesterday, you know, in 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years from now, shit's going to settle into its natural place. Like, how many bad things have you been through in your life and you look back and you're like, well, that was bad, but I'm not going through it now. And it's settled. It's better, right? So eventually things get better. We know that if we give it time. And so it's like, well, then how do I shortcut that process? That was my big problem, was how do I shortcut this? Like I told you, my 8 years of like, I'm all over the place, right? I don't know what the hell to do. I can't sleep. I can't think straight. I'm not creative anymore. I'm hurting myself, my family. So like, I have to eventually figure out, how the hell do I accept this? Because that is the only way to reconcile with any suffering.
So one thing that I figured out, is that I thought, like you just said, I thought that the quote, you know, time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's got a lot better. No, but you know, mental time heals all mental wounds, right. and I believed that, you know, oh, just give it time, and people say that all the time. You know, look, I'll tell you this again, straight up about myself. You know, people ask me all the time about my arm and, you know, the trauma, and I don't want to, it sucked. Okay. It sucked. It was a, you know, 4-ish year process of surgery. It was miserable, but it didn't break me. It was miserable, but it didn't break me. What broke me was my ex-girlfriend leaving me for someone else.
I was about to ask you, what broke you?
That broke my brain.
Wow.
And why did it break my brain? I now know. It broke my brain because my arm wasn't my fault. I never had nightmares about it. I never stayed up awake thinking, oh, if I just would have zigged instead of zagged. No, there's no way I could have known. I didn't do anything wrong. In fact, I did a lot of things right, and it's war and stuff happens, and it is what it is. So there's nothing about that injury that made me feel bad about myself. Conversely, I, from childhood, now know that I was not good enough. I felt not good enough. Therefore, when she left me for someone else,
stacking that on top.
Boom. Well, that's proof right there. I am not good enough. And there it is. So that broke me because it triggered a fundamental childhood belief that that was there, since childhood. So then, that hurt. And again, it broke me straight up. Like I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like, I mean, there was times where I remember what I was doing and I remember thinking, I'm being crazy right now. Like I feel crazy. And but I couldn't control it. It was scary. I'm like, I know I'm crazy right now, but I can't stop it. And it was like, when if you're drinking and you're drunk, you're like fucking drunk, but there's like that little sober voice in your head that's like, dude, you're fucked up, right? It's like, man, you're really messed up. It's that sober voice. It was the same thing. Like I was being crazy. I was acting crazy. I was talking crazy, but there was that voice that was like, dude, you're talking crazy right now. Yeah. But it couldn't.
Can't stop. Can't control it.
Nor could the sober voice make me sober at the time. But so when that happened, I was like, okay, well, time will heal all wounds, just got to give it time. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it hurts now, but give it time. And what I learned from that is time doesn't heal all wounds. And some things don't go away with time, because I gave it 7 years. For 7 years, I mean, it pretty much bothered me, I'll say realistically, daily. More, sometimes obviously way more and sometimes way less, but I definitely thought about it on some level daily for 7 years. The ex-girlfriend, I hated her as much as you can hate someone for 7 years. And it was after this therapy thing that I went through that I really put together why that hurt me so much. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's why it messed me up so bad. And then I did something. I tried everything. I tried therapy. I tried everything and nothing worked. So I did the one thing that I hadn't tried. I contacted her. After 7 years, not a single email, not a text, nothing for 7 years. And out of the blue, I Instagram messaged her and I swear to God, it started. I'm not proud of this, but it's where I was at the time. I said something to the effect of, so I no longer hate you anymore. Jeez, fucking real wordsmith there, true poet. But anyways, dialogue went, she actually was pretty nice considering what I wrote. And, conversations back and forth. And like 2 or 3 months later, I had dinner with her, which literally I kind of still can't even believe that happened. And just talked. Since that, I haven't even thought about it. Totally
acceptance.
Total acceptance, total closure. Everything's been right as rain. And I don't even, not only do I not hate her, but I would say that, I would call her friend now. And she's still with the guy that she left me for, which obviously means she chose
good for him.
Chose rightly. But my point that I'm making is there's certain things that are tied so deep to your subconscious. And you think that time will heal it. But I think certain emotions will not heal until they are assessed, processed, and action is taken on them.
So I'm trying to look at that from the whole PTSD concept, right? Which I don't like. So
what's not to love about PTSD? That was a joke.
Well, before I get off on a tangent here, I think it's like obviously there's an acute stress, right? When you've just went through something and there's those couple week process, 2 to 3 week process, that's going to be, the best time to attack this situation, which we don't do well at all, because we're not shown how to do that. You have to be vulnerable to do that, and that's not the military.
And there's no time because the train keeps moving.
Right. And then there's this, okay, well, now you got PTSD right after that acute process. So, okay, doc, for example, what do I do with that? Well, medicate you most likely. We're going to get you therapy if you need it. And good luck. Here's your pension and compensation. Here's your 10% or whatever the hell they give for it. Then it stops. So people go, well, I guess I just have to deal with this the rest of my life, which is not healthy either, to have that mindset. So I think the concept of why PTG, post-traumatic growth, which is a concept created back in the 80s by a couple doctors that, actually help people flip these change the entire algorithm of how this works in your brain. And there's actually a great book on it, PTG, that's extremely thick, extremely scientific, but when you get into it, you're like, holy shit, there's something in this that we're not, why are we not being taught this? Well, you know why, because that's free. You don't have to get a prescription. You don't have to go see doctors and pay them for it. You don't have taxpayers' money paying for your bill in the VA or whatever. So that is the problem. And everybody will still say, it's got to be bigger than that. No, it's not. It's simply the pharmaceutical industry that's killing us. A big part of it. So, but going back to this, because I love the PTG concepts of really looking at things differently and try to, looking at positive and negative feedback loops. And I'm not going to get into all that right now, but you have an interesting concept on PTSD, and I would love you to share that.
Yeah. So my PTSD story, for lack of a better term, is I started having, I'll just use the word issues. I started having issues, and again, it wasn't like nightmares of getting blown up, whatever, but I was definitely having issues, and I was not acting appropriately, and I knew I needed help. I knew mentally something was off and I needed help. And so I went to the VA, and I, which was the first time I'd ever been to the VA. And this is several years after I got out. And, I was like, hey, I'm having some mental problems. I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know. So I'm here for answers. And I'll never forget this. I did a group session, which I actually don't remember. And then they gave me, I want to say 6 bottles of pills, one of which I will never forget. It was called, apparently I'm a liar because
you forgot.
Yeah, it's called,
done it again, haven't you?
It's called Seroquel.
Okay.
I'm sure you know what Seroquel is. I call it zombie juice because when I took freaking Seroquel, I was like, and then there was 5 other medications. I definitely wasn't suicide risk because I wouldn't have been capable of picking up a weapon, because I was just so out of it. But so I took the medications as prescribed for like a couple weeks, and I couldn't function. I couldn't think. It was like a restrictor chip, was on my brain. So I stopped doing that, and then I kept going back, and I'm like, no, I'm not taking the meds, but let's try the therapy thing. And I kept going to therapy, and I kept telling them one thing, and then they kept telling me, okay, so that's this, which this was PTSD. And then I'd go, okay, so what for lack of a better term, what are the symptoms of PTSD? Oh, this, and this. I'm like, okay, so you're saying I have PTSD? Yes. Okay, and those are the symptoms of PTSD? Yes. I don't have any of those symptoms. So let's start this over again. Well, one of the symptoms is denial.
That's the first one.
Yeah, it's
Take this
like,
pill.
obviously you've got PTSD because you're saying you don't have PTSD, which is the number one symptom.
Well, like you said it earlier, like you didn't have nightmares like a lot of guys typically would. Like, I know mine was like I told you earlier, it was like I could not get out of this room. I could not get out of the space, and that's all I was in. When it was other things that were fucking me up. And so, like for you, your catalyst and trauma, it sounds like, was the trauma of somebody leaving you and saying you're not good enough.
It was
like how many of us deal with that shit in our lives? Like a lot. It was
at first. So I should have mentioned this because kind of important. The catalyst for me going in there was prior to the, and this was a separate person. This is years prior, but was being cheated on. So I was cheated on by the same person. And again, she's not a bad person. And and actually, let me give full context because this is worth mentioning.
Okay.
So, and actually her and I talked about this a couple months ago. So before I got hurt, like I was as confident could be, like she's a very attractive girl, even now, and she's my age, but at the time, 20, whatever, 5, 6. And she was in a group of like 8 or 10 girls walking across the street. I walked up to the group and I'm like, "What's your name?" And the girls were like, whoa. You can't talk to her. Like, you got to go through us. I'm like, all right, like interview me. What do you got? Like, I was at a level 10 confidence. I'm like, nothing can touch me. I was in, a prestigious military unit. Like, I felt like a superhero. I was untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up, interviewing with them. And then she was just like, what are you going to do? Fly up and have dinner with me? And I'm like, because it was across the United States. I'm like,
yep.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And she's like, oh, okay. So point being, that was like the first 6 months of our relationship. And then I got blown up. And then, surgeries, blah, blah, blah. And about 2 years later, whatever it was, I was medically retired. And then we moved in together because I was now out. And I was in an absolute straight up depression for probably 2.5 years. I was still going through surgeries. But that wasn't the cause of the depression. The cause, now, obviously I know this, the cause of the depression was, I couldn't be me. I couldn't work out. I couldn't shoot. I couldn't do anything that I liked doing. But most importantly, the real cause of the depression was that I was my job. My identity was the job. And when the job was gone, so was my identity. And I didn't know who I was outside of that job. And I spent 2.5 years literally having no idea who I was, because I was nothing without that job. Why was I nothing without that job? Well, because I wasn't good enough as a kid. Goes back to the same thing. Because I wasn't special, because I didn't deserve anything good. So, and I couldn't get myself out of it. I couldn't. Now, why couldn't I get myself out of it? Because I didn't know what the problem was at the time. I was just like, it's depression. I had no idea. She did for several years after the injury, everything she could to help. But what else can you do? So the reason I'm saying this is then, yeah, she cheated on me. But again, I was not me. I was not in the right state of mind. But that, I was already broken. Broken to another level. I didn't seek any treatment up until that event happened. And so then, now cut to I'm in therapy, and finally I was just like, look, you guys are telling me what it should be, and I keep telling you what it is. Like, I'm telling you what it feels like. for me. And you're telling me that I'm wrong. Like, you're telling me that, no, what you feel is actually this. No, it's exactly what the fuck I'm saying it is, you know? And what basis do you have to know what it is? Do you have PTSD? Have you ever had it? Well, no. Well, then what the fuck do you know?
Well, no, but I am a doctor, and I may not know what it's like to feel what you feel, but I know what it's like to feel good, and I'm going to try to help you get there. You've probably heard that before.
My whole thing was just like, look, I've went through many years of school on this, and I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like,
I just don't care.
Congratulations, on your knowledge, which knowledge is not power. Knowledge is only power if you have a plan of execution, which means you do need to get out there and feel, which is hard. I mean, get it. I don't expect every trauma doc or psychologist or everybody to go out and, hey, you need to go see what we feel so you can help, because they're going to be able to help anybody at that point. So I get why they're there, but I think it is an illusion in separation, as they call it, especially when you lose your identity, you know, or people, I used to get this a lot, you know, you're not who you are at work. So when you come home, drop that shit at the door. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. That ruck is permanently attached. I'm sorry. Well, screw you. You know, I had an ex that was like that. And I'm like, well, you're an MD. Do you drop your shit at the door, or do you just save lives during the day when you're at 9 to 5? And then it's like, okay, I understand that. But like that illusion can create a serious problem. And I think that's what you're because I felt the same thing, you know, and I think that's where they don't understand, because they're saying, no, this is post-traumatic stress, which is why you're rejecting it, or why you're questioning it and saying, no, it's not that, it's something else. Trust me. So this is what I want you to share,
yeah,
right? Because I know you're getting there, but
yeah.
what is the thing that it was for you that they were saying it wasn't?
So they kept saying PTSD. And again, I just wasn't feeling it, you know? And you know, it was an event, which I don't want to take the time to explain it. But an event happened that, well, I'll give you the very, very short story version. Very short story is, so I was definitely having issues. And let me mention this too, because this is critical. Another thing that I realized much later, actually later even than probably the thing I'm about to tell you about, was, you know, I was like, oh, I lost my identity, you know, work was my identity. And then I realized that I actually never had one.
Tell me more.
Well, you know, do you really have an identity, a true identity formed in reality as a teenager? I don't think so. And then when you get in the military, what do? It's an indoctrination process. They give you your identity. It's not a choice.
That's a good point.
They give it to you. They tell you who you are. You're a Marine. That's your identity. Oh, and by the way, it's not just for now. It's forever.
That's why guys cry when they get that EGA, because it's all of a sudden their identity. That's a good point.
And
wow.
So I realized I never had an identity. I didn't lose my identity. I never had one. The military gave me one.
So it was unauthentic. It was what you wanted at the time, but it was not really authentic.
It was never.
To you.
It was never really me.
Yeah.
It was never really me.
Wow, that's deep shit, man.
Yeah, and that took me a long time to realize. So then back to, you know, I'm having these issues, and one night, or technically morning, I was doing bodyguarding in LA, and it was like, I don't know, 3 a.m. I can't remember. Driving back to where I was staying, and it was actually on Sunset Boulevard. Never forget it. And I was pretty damn tired, and there's no cars on the road. Maybe it was 3:30, almost 4. And the next thing you know, there's like fire trucks. Like I hear sirens. And then the next thing you know, there's fire trucks, like 8 of them. And 2 of them are driving in my lane towards me. I'm like, what the fuck are these guys doing? You know? And like, I'm stopped, but they're still coming towards me and they're still coming. And anyways, I'm just like, and then I look over and there's like this parking lot and then there's this building and there's a fire. Like I'm almost parallel, actually pretty much parallel to it. You know, I had stopped because, you know, they were coming this way, but the reason they kept coming towards me is I'm pretty much parked in front of the freaking fire, but it was like 100 yards across this parking lot. And I looked at the fire and, you know, by now, you know, other engines had come from the other direction and stopped. And the next thing I know, I'm running in the middle of the parking lot towards the fire. And I remember looking over and seeing, I want to say 3, I don't exactly remember, but I want to say it was 3 firefighters. And I remember one specifically looked back at me. It was probably 10 yards in between us. And he didn't say anything, but the look on his face was like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Which made me go, what the fuck am I doing? You know, and I just like stopped and they kept going. And then I just kind of sheepishly was like, I'll go back to my truck. Good luck, boys. You know, and I went back to my truck and I sat there and it was the best I had felt since pre-getting blown up. I felt full of energy. Like I could have lifted up my truck and threw it. I felt like I just felt great. And I didn't know why. I was so confused. And and then actually I forgot to mention, as I was walking back to my truck, I hear the quickie saw spin up.
Oh yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. And that was like, whoa. I mean, I physically had to.
Because you know what that means.
Entry.
To you.
Yeah, it was entry, fucking go time. And I was like, just keep walking. I got to my truck and there
is no quickie saw. There is no quickie saw.
It's like, that's all in your mind. And I drove, I don't know, 5 blocks, whatever, pulled over, and I sat there for 2 or 3 hours. I don't remember how long it was. It was a long time. The sun was way up by the time I left. And I just sat there and I was like, what the fuck was that? What was I doing? How did that all happen? But why do I feel like so good? Why is that the best? I felt all these different things. And I came up with this concept.
Because you don't have PTSD.
So I came up with a term that I call LTSD. I have lack of traumatic stress disorder. I miss traumatic or chaotic stress. Because when traumatic or chaotic stress is happening, I'm calm in that.
Because you have purpose in that.
That's my purpose. That's my jam. Dude, when I was running towards that fire, dude, I was cool as a cucumber. Couldn't have felt better. I felt amazing. And I realized it's because I've been reverse wired to be calm under chaos. So when the environment is absolute chaos, like CUB, like combat in general, my brain completely calm. When the environment is calm, say everyday life, my brain is chaotic.
Chaos.
It's absolutely chaotic. And it was then that I realized too that I had been in my life, especially in my relationship, I had been creating chaos in my relationship by doing, a million different, causing fights, a million different things that I could bring up that I was causing chaos, drinking too much, a million different things. She didn't like it when I drove fast. I'd freaking drive my truck like it was Indy 500. And I knew it was going to start a fight. But as soon as she got pissed off and started freaking just going nuts.
She'd go up, you go down, right?
She'd go up, and
Okay.
then I was chill. Then I
Sure.
was like, dude, what's the big deal? Whoa, calm down.
Why are you overreacting?
Calm down. It's just 90. Jeez.
Yeah. This car can go way faster.
Yeah, like I'm not even maxed on the pedal. Nitrous is still full. And so it was then that I realized that I was creating chaos in order to basically calm myself and feel in control of my own brain. Because if I create chaos externally in the environment, then I control, my brain is now calm. So I would do that over and over and over again. And I became aware of it then. And that's when I basically accepted that, okay, I don't exactly have PTSD, but this LTSD, this need for chaos, I have it, I'm afflicted with it, level 10, which brings me to the other point is it took me many years on top of that to figure out, and you and I were talking about this morning, but now in hindsight, I'm a fundamentally self-destructive person.
Yeah, I remember you said that.
I am an absolute fundamentally self-destructive person.
Now explain that, because I'm sure people are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I love to destroy myself. Love it. If everything's going good, great. How can I destroy it? Now, it's easy to go, here's the messed up thing, because this is an absolute fact. You don't grow when you're comfortable. You grow when you're uncomfortable. Discomfort is growth. So, in a sick and twisted way, my self-destructive behavior forces growth because it keeps me constantly creating uncomfortable, messed up situations that I then have to grow to fix. So my self-destructiveness was justified as essentially self-development, as personal growth. Let's see how much I can destroy myself and come back from it. And I mean that in every way. Mentally destroy myself, physically destroy myself. I'll destroy everything. I will torture myself in every single way because I'm looking for something that I can't overcome. I'm looking for oblivion, the thing that's unrecoverable, the thing that I'm not stronger than. I'm searching for ultimate self-destruction.
Now, how do you take when somebody says, well, Tyler, that could be an unhealthy way of living? How do you answer that?
You are absolutely correct. No doubt about it. 100%.
Well, you mentioned earlier, like because I even questioned that. I was like, self-destruct, because and I'm sure everybody listening to that was like, there's something to that. Maybe there's a reason why I wake up at, I don't wake up at 4 a.m., but I'm sure there's people who wake up at 4 a.m. and thrash themselves for 2 hours in the gym, or have something in their lives that they might consider they're trying to be self-destructive out of growth. And you said, like, what is the military?
Oh, most of your time is that job is generally done at the expense of everything else in your life.
Self-destructive.
It's a fundamentally self-destructive job. And that's the irony of the whole thing is, I think one of the fundamental qualities of the warrior, for lack of a better term, we'll call it the warrior mentality, the warrior spirit, whatever it is. I think self-destruction is one of the most fundamental parts of it. And the reason is because the people that sign up for that job have to be self-destructive. You wouldn't do it if you weren't.
The risk you're signing up to take, you have to identify.
Yeah, I mean, you
there's people that don't, and they're foolish, and they find out the hard way when they're in, like, oh, this ain't for me, right?
Which hey, you figure that out. Like me, when when I got blown up and people are like, oh my gosh, I'm, so sorry that happened to you. I'm like, well, I did join the infantry. Like I did go to combat. Like, yeah, I got injured, no shit. Like that was always a very obvious risk. But that self-destructiveness, that fundamental self-destructiveness, that's the job. Now, I believe, going back, I believe that fundamental self-destructiveness also comes from the lack of self-worth. I'm not really worth anything. I don't really matter. I'm not really special. So fuck it. I can continue to destroy myself and see where it goes. And if I can use my destruction, which is what I justified for a long time, if I can use my destruction to help someone else, then maybe I am worth something.
I think you're getting somewhere with that.
And that is what I realized I was doing. And even the military was, you are literally destroying yourself for the team. That's the entire concept of what we did. Never ask for help. Destroy yourself to contribute to the team. And then guys get out and that destruction continues, and a guy continues to help out a buddy, and then that guy kills himself the next day because he never asked for help. It's not weird that happened. It's absolutely, I'm not saying it's good, obviously, but I'm saying that's what we've been indoctrinated to do, is give the team everything, ask for nothing. Yeah. It's fundamentally self-destructive. And then for whatever reason, the military, the government, and quite frankly, society, and sadly, even us in general, somehow think that we're going to go from that fundamentally self-destructive behavior to then being out and go, okay, I don't need to do that anymore. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way because that's who we are. And like anything, the only way to change it is you have to be aware of it.
Yeah.
So now I look for healthy chaos.
Right. That's what I was going to ask next is like, so now how do we take that, which most people might sound like I don't know if I want to live that way. And I get it. When you said LTSD earlier and you said a lack thereof, it actually made me, for the first time in my life, which I've put a little bit of life's work into this, and into the PTG concepts and trying to, figure out where to start with my life, let alone helping other people and sharing. And when you said that, I'm like, holy shit, I wonder if that actually feels realer than saying, oh, I just have trauma. Because a lot of things, like you said, like a lot of people will say, well, that was my trauma. I blew myself up. I lost my leg. I lost my arm. I have a TBI. I have, all kinds of shit going on. When it potentially is something else, like in your case, your ex-girlfriend. I had similar situations in my life.
But even she was a catalyst to what happened when I was a kid. That were my perceived inner child worth. Yeah. Like everything was external to that.
Yeah. And I think some people, like I've had a weird awakening with family issues in my past. Like mom and dad are still married after a long time, almost 50 years. Healthy to a point. I mean, in their late 80s, mid 80s. And, came from a non-broken home, which most families are broken nowadays. So I thought I lived a good life, which doesn't mean there's not trauma just because you're a good, nuclear family as you grow up, Now there was a lot of shit going on. And, but I understand what I believe a strong marriage in theory should be like. And then to get in my first situation and get divorced right away, I now feel like I have, holy shit, I didn't hold up to what I was supposed to do like my parents did. So now I have a lack of self-worth, like you were saying earlier. And, ex-wife cheating on me, and I'm like, fuck, there we go again. 3 times I catch it and I let it go because my worth is like, no, I'm better than that, honey. I can do better. And I take on the blame, and then it happens again, and I'm like, fuck, and then it goes down. And so it's not necessarily but everything pops, right? The stress bubble, as I call it, pops eventually, but majority of it wasn't from the trauma. It wasn't from a shooting. It wasn't from getting blown up. It wasn't from a whatever. It was from all the other shit that I think is great to bring out right now on the table for people to hear this. Because I think people look at that thing, the room, versus, no, what's all the shit exterior to that? What's the other monsters that are really bringing you down? So with that, because I agree. I mean, I love chaos, man. If I'm not doing 40 things at one time, I do the same thing. My head starts turning into chaos. And then if I'm at home with that around the family, again, chaos. And so I've had to wipe a lot of these things free of my mind, the divorces, the cheating, the coming home to my 8-year-old son and going, hey, buddy, I'm home after almost a year being deployed. Mom, who's that? When I walk in the door, there goes my worth again. I'm a shitty dad too. Like, wow. And it just keeps compiling until I broke down years later and not knowing how to deal with it. And I blamed that room when I appreciate you coming here, man, and helping me with that, because it's hard for guys like us to get that conversation, to be vulnerable and to talk about all these deep things and to help others that are listening to go, well, maybe I can look at this differently. And so now moving forward, what does Tyler Gray do now to control or to find healthy chaos? What is healthy chaos for you?
For me, it's work, working on set is very chaotic. But I want to say that I want to add this right here because I feel it's very necessary. And that is, daily, I still struggle with everything.
Oh yeah.
Daily. And I don't want anyone listening to this to think that, I've got everything figured out or like, I'm good, I'm cured. No, I struggle with self-destruction daily. And I struggle with, constantly having to swing my need for chaos and my need for destruction to something healthy. But it's, you gotta be aware of the problem to change it. And on that note, and I'm going to throw this out there, the other part of it too is when you go back to low self-worth and not good enough and all those things, the way children think is very, very black and white. And I realized that one of the things that I developed from, as a child, being alone all the time, not being picked, to go hang out with, the cool kids, that actually lived in my neighborhood and all these things. And anyways, it was, I developed a lot of resentment. And that resentment could show itself in pretty ruthless ways. Like, I was just like overseas. Like there was certain things that would probably bother a lot of people. And like, once I put somebody into a bad category, there's absolutely nothing that could happen to them that I would care. I would literally feel nothing at all. And that led to the belief that I was bad or evil.
Sure. Society says that's unwanted.
Yeah. And
So you're bad for
I
thinking
struggled for a long time thinking that I was possibly like,
yeah, you start believing it.
An evil person, a very bad, evil person. And the reason I'm mentioning this is if you subconsciously instill that, or it's subconsciously instilled, how much of my self-destruction is self-punishment for being subconsciously thinking I'm a bad, evil person?
Yeah.
Again,
but now that it's conscious to you, you don't need to punish yourself.
No.
But you had to go through that to get to that point, which I think a lot of people are afraid to open themselves up to do, because even sitting here having the power, the presence, the the, speaking fearlessly about, I'm self-destructive. Like most people would never say that because they're afraid they're going to lose their job, or they're going to, oh, you're now a psych issue, dude. You can't be on the team anymore. Like, fuck that. That's a problem for us.
Yeah, no,
and
absolutely.
because that person is needing to work on that in that space in their time in their life. It is their time to heal from that and become a bigger, better version of themselves so they can do a better job at their job. And we prevent them from doing it. And that's when there's this gap, this lull of misery, of pain, of resistance. And you have to get through that. That's good to talk about this shit.
That misery and pain is actually a very good point. I used to say this all the time when I did speaking stuff, and I would say, look, I don't know how to make anyone here happy. It's way too complex. I don't know any of you that well. I don't know how to make any of you happy. That being said, I can absolutely tell everyone here right now a surefire formula for misery. Guaranteed. And that is be the opposite of who you fundamentally are.
Yeah. How true is that?
Fight who you really are, and you will be miserable. The more you fight your true self, the more miserable you will be. And for me, I just, that year and a half ago is when I really started figuring out who I was. And I now no longer care of anyone's opinion of what they think of that person.
Because you're the monster.
Yeah. And if, again, like, oh, you think that, I'm a piece of shit. Okay. I don't care. I'm going to be me. I'm going to be the absolute authentic version of myself. That's my identity. And I'm going to be that. And I'm not going to apologize for it. And I'm not going to change it. And I'm already 1,000 times happier. And the other interesting thing about the apologize. Gosh, I hate when I forget points. But the biggest thing is you don't. The more you just. The worst thing you can do, here's a better way to say it. The worst thing you can do is try and live up to other people's expectations of you, their society's expectations, your family's expectations, your family's demands, your want. None of it matters. None of it matters. And not only does it not matter, but the more you go down that road, the further you're going to get away from who you truly are. And one day, who you really are is going to win. Like it's not going away. It's going to win. And everything you've built is on you've built a castle on sand, because it's not going to stay. And so for me now, I'm aware of the chaos I create. I'm aware of my need for self-destruction. That's what I was going to say. So, a funny conversation I had with my therapist. And by the way, I still go to therapy weekly.
Good.
Like weekly.
Everybody needs a coach.
Absolutely. And on that note, though, let me say this, because this is critical. I call it goodwill hunting syndrome. Like, it takes a while to find the right one.
Oh yeah.
And if you think that you're going to see one and it's a perfect fit, I mean, it could, but more than likely you're going to go through a dozen before you find the one, the Robin Williams, version for you. But I was talking to my therapist and I was like, I think I'm worried. I'm worried that I'm a sociopath. And she's like, Tyler, if you were a sociopath, you wouldn't be worried about it. You wouldn't be asking me. Like, they're not aware. A true sociopath isn't necessarily aware.
There's new studies now that there's actually righteous sociopaths and there's evil sociopaths. Because if you have the ability to kill another human being, which clearly you do, you have to have some sociopathic tendencies.
Oh,
you have to.
freaking-
Right?
oh,
Humans
no.
in general, to survive, we have to be. I mean, look at 100 years ago. You came into my woman's teepee. She's gonna murder your ass because she has to protect the children. So everybody had this thing, and again, this hunter-gatherer separation separated the bad days back.
Yeah.
We talked about this earlier. People now think it's unwanted, it's bad. Well, it's necessary because, and that's where you can see society declining. Because I'll ask certain people in my classes, which is very, very, very rare. But in general, I think if you ask 1,000 people on the street, if somebody came in your home tonight and tried to hurt your family, what would you be able to hurt that person to stop them? No, I would call the police. I think bullshit fundamentally. Now, if they didn't act to help save that person or that child in their own family, then that's cowardice. That's just sheer cowardice. There's no other way to put that. That's why, go back to the monster concept that we always hear all over the internet. And Jordan Peterson talks about it quite a bit. Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to be that? You want to be formidable because I know how to use my sword. But because I am the monster in control, I'll never have to touch that sword. But if I do, I will fucking cut you down if you come into my house and try to hurt my family or take away the freedoms that we have in this country, for example. So that's a good way. That's a better idea as far as I'm concerned to live. I agree with that. And so I wonder, because there's actually a great book. I think it's called The Wisdom of Sociopaths or Psychopaths, which you can learn from CEOs, cartel leaders, and military and spies. And when you read it, you're like, it goes into the thousands of years of culture. Remind me, I'll try to put a link to it down because it's awesome. Put it in the video, guys. But it makes me go, holy shit, maybe we are all sociopaths to a point.
Mean, I have a lot of the traits, no question.
Because you said it. You, just like me, get extremely calm. I need pressure. I need a clock. I remember you listening, not to skip off here too much, but you, I think it was one of your films or something. You said you set a timeline. I remember that specific word and I don't remember what it was in relation to. I don't know if it was therapy or some journey or something, but you said, I set a time limit and it was a conference or something you did. It was some conference you set out in networking. It was something to do with networking. And you said, I set a timeline because you need a timeline because when you have a timeline as a quick starter, cognitively, you have to be raced against the clock in order to have high performance. If you're not raced against the clock, you're fucking, it's like if I live forever, what the fuck's the point of waking up in the morning?
Yeah,
I could take a year off. But the mere fact that of our demise one day is going to happen sooner than we want shapes the focus on how I'm going to live today.
Yeah, I say one of the things I say is I live my life to risk it.
Yeah.
And
because it's already risky.
Yeah,
you're gonna die as soon as you come into this thing.
Well, and the other interesting thing too is it's like, also with sociopaths, it's one of those things where, it's like violence. Violence is interesting because somebody asked me about violence and I was like thinking about it and I'm like, not once overseas was I ever angry.
You're happy.
Yeah.
Meaning like I think it's I call it the away-sit concept.
Yeah, I was never there's a difference between violence and anger and calm violence.
And you find yourself more angry here when you're not overseas.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think it's it's frustrating because I think the other interesting thing that I feel is when you see, and I'm going to use the Matrix as an analogy because it works, but when you're in a combat zone, war zone, whatever you want to call it, or even certain third world countries not at war, you're seeing how humans interact when there's no rules. And if someone's never seen that, their perception of the world is skewed because what they think we are is very different than what we really are. And I'll use a great example that I can prove it domestically, and that is Hurricane Katrina.
Yep, I was there.
When there's no rules, some people's morality doesn't change at all. Some people's changes a great deal. And you have to see that firsthand to really accept that at the end of the day, we're animals. We're animals with the priority being on our own survival, and then that of our families, and then our friends. But fundamentally, we are animals, and everything is fine when resources are plentiful and equal. But as soon as it's between, there's one loaf of bread and that's all there is, and it's me and you, well, then that's a very, very, very different.
We can share it and cut it in half.
We can all just share. No,
sure,
but
go ahead and cut it.
But if I have more bread, I can trade for something else, and you know how it is. But it's one of those things where I think that it's more than likely, and again, hey, everyone's different. But for myself and for many people that I've talked to and have friends, usually the trauma that you're focused on is not the act. That's the symptom, not the disease.
I agree.
And a great example of this would be like addiction. Treat addiction. You can never, the problem is alcohol, or the problem is, whatever it is. And don't get me wrong. My dad's an alcoholic. How he's still alive to this day, I don't know. But my dad's not an alcoholic because of alcohol. He's not an addict because of the substance. And if you, even if you took away all the alcohol in the world, he would still be an addict because he's masking.
He'd find something else too.
He's masking the fact that he was abandoned as a kid.
Yeah.
That's the disease. And if you don't cure that disease, the addiction, the symptoms, they'll always be there, because you gotta attack everything at the root. And if you haven't thought about what the root may be, then that is a journey that you definitely need to go down.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Man, wow, that's deep. Thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a deep-rooted journey. Like I said, it's all the way back to childhood.
What's that? Goes all the way back to what?
I was like, yeah, it's deep. It's a deep-rooted journey. It's all the way back to childhood. Of course.
Sure.
No, I probably, when things are uncomfortable, I make jokes.
No, I mean, how many people are, I can imagine, because I'm doing it myself, thinking like, what am I missing in my life that is potentially contributing to suffering? There's a lot of hidden things, and every I find something, like I swear every month when I dive deep, or like just sit here and have these conversations with people. This is why I think that's necessary, is to share, because like I say it all the time, the world's a forum. And, we know that, the basic fundamental communication that we had in the military up until probably Vietnam, when it all stopped, when planes started taking people back and forth versus boats, was one big thing. We talked about this earlier. It's different now. It's changed. And so that separation is getting worse, right? Society, the warrior society up here that we talked about earlier, and then, or I guess I shouldn't put them up or down, right? It's kind of like we're just separate. We're going in separate directions. And that's, I think, a part of just our world evolving. That's all it is, right? We can't change that. It's not, nobody all of a sudden going to be like, hey guys, wait, let's bring these two worlds back together. It's not going to happen, right? The whole world's not going to come to conscious or come to Jesus all of a sudden, or whatever you want to call it, and all of a sudden change that. So as it gets worse, it will get worse. And dealing with it, I think, is going to get worse, because society is always going to say that is bad. That's unwise. Just like, man, I lost my job today. Oh man, that's so bad. I feel so sorry for you. Well, don't feel fucking sorry for me, man. It's just a part of life. Now I need to get my ass going again. But by you telling me that makes me go, yeah, maybe I am worthless. And then that brings you down. So the community aspect is gone as well, because there's no communication anymore. The community is failing itself, in my opinion. Like look at the military, classic Marine Corps, right? You know, we used to travel on boats and have that opportunity to off gas for like 30 to 35 days, like my grandfather did on the way home. Sometimes more than that, depending on where the ship goes. Sometimes they'll pull into a Libo port and, hey man, get it out of your system, guys, and then get your asses back on. Let's isolate. So that is gone. So therefore the community is now gone, because if they do try to talk about it, if I did say, hey, staff sergeant, hey gunny, hey platoon sergeant, platoon commander, whoever, I need to talk about this. You're nothing more than a liability at this point anymore. So the community doesn't even take care of itself anymore. I know there's some good teams out there. There's great guys I'm not just saying everybody in the military is bad, but it's, if more people in leadership can, and I know we talked about leadership earlier, try to identify this massive, potentially catastrophic problem that we have, to not allow guys to be able to off gas and regenerate mentally, not just physically, I think we'll be in a better place. It's a better idea. I mean, but I'm worried, really worried that that's not going to happen.
No, I am too. I mean, I've seen it, you know, like with guys, you know, getting DUIs and just getting fried,
destroyed,
especially in the special operations community. It's like, oh yeah, the guy got a DUI. What a piece of shit.
He's an alcoholic, like you were just saying. No, it's not related to that, man.
Well, okay.
Something else.
And again, let's say he is alcoholic. Okay. Maybe it's the 10 deployments though. I don't know. I'm talking crazy. You know, it's you're an asset, and it's the second you become a liability, you're out. And you know, you look at the way the military look at Vietnam. Vietnam, you know, they got R&R, and they'd let them go to Saigon, freaking get hookers, get in bar fights. They'd go crazy. Mm-hmm. Did the military fry them? No. Why not? Because they've been in the bush for 40, you know, I mean, I'm making numbers up, but they've been in the bush for 45 days. Yeah, they're going to get out and freaking let off some steam. That was
the MPs couldn't catch them.
But that was okay. It was accepted, and it was understood that, dude, we're people. Like, people are going to do, like, that's how we are. You know, work hard, play hard. Like, yeah, of course that. Oh, they got in a bar fight. Well, okay. Did they win? You know, oh, okay, cool. Now there's some ridiculous expectation. And again, we talked about this earlier, but you know, you've got a first world society here. Okay. First world, you know, it's a pretty easy life, right? And it's a pretty, you know, benign, simple environment. Over here is a war zone, combat. They are 180 degrees opposite of each other. By that logic, if you're good at home, you should suck in a war zone. If you're good in a war zone, you should suck at home, because they're polar opposites. And how do you get, we start here, how do you get good in this one? Simple. Exactly what I talked about earlier. You have what I believe to be a fundamental genetic precursor, some kind of wiring for to be comfortable in calm and chaos. And then you are reverse wired and trained and developed to be calm in that chaos. And then you become calm in that chaos. And once that tiger is out of the cage, or lion's out of the cage, it doesn't go back in. Once it's hunted in the jungle, I'm not going back to that life.
But you have to.
Yeah, but you have to.
So at what point, what does a lion do when he does have to go back? Because he's got to live amongst everybody else without killing them.
Yeah, and that right there, I think, I think that's the problem. I think the problem is that we need ourselves, because screw everyone else. We need to accept that you can still be a lion. A lion doesn't have to be violent, but it doesn't take.
But he has the capability of it at any point in time.
But it doesn't take violence for everyone to know that the lion's the king of the jungle. Everyone knows it doesn't have to do anything.
And I think that's what, guys that have been successful, not necessarily just in business or, money wise, but successful transitioning the lion, I guess, since we're on that path, into a different purpose. Because that's what I think is happening. We have this purpose to go hunt this lion. That's what he does. And then you got to come back to the village and you're like, I need to still hunt. So, okay, how do I change my purpose in the village? And I know that's where, people ask me like a lot when I do veterans gatherings and group, warrior gatherings and just chat around the campfire kind of stuff. And I say, I changed my purpose, but it didn't come without struggle, man. It didn't come without hardship. It didn't come without divorce, losing a child, hitting rock bottom, almost filing for bankruptcy. It didn't come without all those things. But then once it did happen for me, and now, of course, this is why we talk and we share so people can, in hindsight, look back and go, well, wait, if somebody else is in this situation, just, we can learn a lot from each other by, again, sharing and go, well, hey, hopefully you don't have to wait 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years to find that new purpose. So for me, I'm still in the fight. I'm still literally in the fight. You can call me old school or whatever you want, but I'm still making shit every single day. I'm still coming up with ideas every day, better than I ever have in my entire career in the military. The shit I came up with back then, I laugh at. I'm like, God, I've gotten so much more capabilities now. The training concepts, I feel faster, more accurate, and more just the ability to think clear than I ever have before, because all that shit's behind me now. And so I feel like I can really finally give back in my mid 40s now, better than I ever have when I was in my 20s or 30s. And I look forward to the next purpose that opens up for me in the next 20 to 40 years of my life. And so I think a lot of people are still trying to find out what is that thing. And so find that thing. And for you said, you love being on the set, because you're in it, you're helping people. You're helping people with an understanding of what it's like to be in our world. You're giving a realistic and authentic presence of the character, because you give a shit, you care about that, versus letting the rest of Hollywood, which we know does not care about that. And because they'll typically come back with answers like I've had working in Hollywood going, well, the 256 million viewers that we have aren't going to care about that stuff. So stop wasting your time with it, because they're not going to prove it. And you're like, okay, well then you're just telling me you're not authentic all around. Because if you're going to skip that part, the details of it, then I don't know if I want to work with you on the rest of the shit. So I appreciate what you're doing there on that front as well. And I know a lot of people may not appreciate it. So I'll tell you that I do, because I think it's a critically important thing for our community.
So I say this all the time, Hollywood, good or bad, Hollywood is the largest PSYOPs campaign in the world.
Oh yeah.
Without a doubt. And any military project, if I'm not a part of it and I care to get it right, if I'm not a part of it, it's still going to get done. I mean, it's not like it's not going to happen if I don't do it.
Yeah,
it'll get done. It'll just not have my input. And I try and put my input in a way that I think benefits the community. And far as purpose, two things, because it's the perfect thing we talked about, to segue to talk about what we talked about earlier. But far as purpose, don't force it. And don't think it's going to happen in a day or a month. You know what I mean? It takes time to figure it out and find it.
It's okay to struggle.
It's okay to struggle. And what I would say is, it's not about you just have to be open to finding a new purpose. Yeah. And then one will come along.
If you're open to suffering, more suffering will help alleviate the suffering you have in a positive, healthy chaos manner, like we've been trying to talk about. Yeah,
absolutely. And as far as purpose, and you and I talked about this earlier, but one of my theories, and if anyone has read anything based on evolutionary psychology, it's not in it, but it's based on the concept of, or the theory of evolutionary psychology. The theory of evolutionary psychology says, and I'm going to give the very layperson's definition, but essentially we are designed, evolution is a lagging, it takes time to evolve. So right now, the environment that we are designed for was hunter-gatherer societies of, thousands of years ago. That's what we're designed for right now. That's what, if you think like in a robot analogy, that's what we're programmed for. But that's not the world we live in. And where that goes back to purpose is if you take that kind of, if you think of thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago, I believe the fundamental problem right now, and this is separate from LTSD, PTSD is completely separate, but I do not think that warriors were designed as of right now to live past war.
Because they never did back in the day.
Because
most of them didn't. Because
they didn't. If a warrior survived one battle, that was considered that dude's senior. They fought in their teens. There were no old warriors. And if there were, they were super rare. So back in the day, warriors never outlived their one purpose of being a warrior. And if they did happen to survive battle, you got to remember too, medicine, even in the Civil War, if you got grazed by a bullet, you get gangrene and die. That was the Civil War. Go back 1,000 years. Go back to medieval times. So let's say you just happen to survive 1, 2, whatever wars. Back then, even up until the 1800s, late 1800s, the warrior was still valuable and still had purpose outside of war to protect its community. Now we outsource protection. We outsource it. Are the outsourced people warriors? Some are, some aren't. But it's outsourced. Just because you're a warrior, that's not your responsibility anymore. The protection is outsourced. So we are now living past our purpose. And there is none in modern day society outside of war. And I think that is one of the most fundamental conflicts that people don't even realize they're experiencing is, as I said, if you can't be you, you will be miserable. And a warrior who is not able to fulfill a fundamental purpose of self-actualization of being a warrior, it's going to be miserable. So the solution is to find a purpose outside of war, outside of, again, Travis is a great example. I'm a great example. Okay. I don't carry a gun. Well, okay. It's not true. I actually do carry a gun for a living, but it's loaded with blanks. So it is a real gun, but my point being is, my purpose is to, work on projects that portray our community authentically. So
yeah, you get to live in that.
That fits in my warrior purpose. Yeah. You are making products for warriors every day and training warriors. You're still within your warrior purpose. Not that we're saying it has to be within that same purpose. If you suddenly go, dude, my purpose is to be the best damn fisherman in the world. Cool. Like, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I'm sure there's guys out there that have found other ways to cope and deal with this shit. But
yeah, and love it. And it's, a hobby can be a purpose or whatever. But
maybe they think they're just murdering every fish that they catch.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still a hunter. I'm just a hunter in water. So
worms
with worms instead of bullets. Worms are my bullets. So it's just one of those things. Hopefully this has, and again, total theory. I have absolutely no proof to back that up other than a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that I don't think there's a single veteran I know that hasn't struggled with purpose.
No, I've never met one. Never.
You know, and the other thing is, and again, this kind of will lead into Veterans Day. 1, struggling with purpose. 2, struggling with community. You're surrounded when you're in by everyone on the exact same path with very similar mind states, very similar backgrounds, and quite frankly, very similar futures at that time. And then you leave the military and you are now thrown, and actually I'm going to say this because I freaking hate the term reintegration. I hate it. I think it's bullshit. And here's why. Would you say, in your opinion, do you think that a teenager is integrated into society?
No.
They're in school.
Yeah, they're not in it.
So everyone keeps
and
telling
they're not preparing them for society either. So
no. If you join in your, 18, 19, everyone's telling you to reintegrate. The problem is you were never integrated. You're not reintegrating. You're integrating because you've never been in society outside of your parents' house and school, which is absolutely not society. It's a very closed environment.
Yeah, unless you join the military late or in your late 20s or something, maybe. But
yeah,
the majority, I agree with that. Yeah, you've never experienced it before until you get out. And some guys, it's 29 years later, and they're like fucking culture shocked, or they're 4 years later, and that's even harder because they're younger, they're not as mature, and they don't know how to handle that shit. So that's why I think a lot of guys are going to the extreme.
Well, and who gives you all the advice before you get out?
People that aren't in society.
People that are still in.
Yeah.
What do you know about being out? You're still in. It's like, that always drove me crazy. And even the people that the civilian ACAB people, I'm like, but yeah, you're a contractor, so you're still doing the same job.
Yeah.
Are you really?
You just stepped right.
You just stepped right
chair.
Yeah, you just stepped right back in. Like, you're not in society. What are you talking about? You quit. You quit society and came back just as a contractor.
Yeah. That's why I love talking to as many guys as I can and active duty that are contemplating getting out. I'm like, hey, we need to have time to talk.
Oh, dude,
there's going to be a lot you need to know.
And you talked to one today, and I say this to him all the time, and I say this to everyone that I talk to that's still on active duty. I say, listen, I'll tell them all these different things, and then I'll go, I've been where you've been. You haven't been where I have. And that's not like me, that's just a fact. I was in. You have not yet been out. So, listen to what I'm saying, because I wish somebody that had that experience had talked to me when I was still in. I would have done things massively different. And the other part of that is, and again, I'm going to say this because I'm assuming the majority of people that are probably listening to this will be veterans and not active duty. But if you are active duty, I'm sorry. But I just don't think I'm wrong. But the crazy part is that when you're in, you think being in is the hard part. And then you think when you get out, the easy part starts. And the reality is the exact opposite.
I don't think anybody that's transitioned would disagree with that.
I think
maybe somebody that had a really easy military life, that had no stress, no trauma, they never deployed, maybe it's just another job at that point, really. I can understand that. But when even then, you're still indoctrinated into that different world than the society that we now know.
Yeah.
So I can see that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
It's a loss of, again, identity. It's a loss of community. It's a loss of, it's almost one of every type of loss that you can have. And what's crazy, and if anyone has not looked at the steps of grief from loss, look them up now. I'm totally serious. Look them up and apply them, which for whatever reason is not put out as information by the VA, because I think it should be. But when you get out of the military, doesn't matter if you serve combat or not, doesn't matter at all. You 100% are grieving loss without question.
Agreed.
You literally lost your job. You lost a group of friends. You lost that community. You lost that purpose. These are facts.
Even the guy that's listening right now going, no, I threw my boots over the wire and I ran out as fast as I could. Bullshit. You're still going to grieve that.
Oh, yeah,
You're
absolutely.
going to wish that. You'll question it, at least. You may not have regret of getting out. I mean, I have no regret of getting out, but fuck, I miss it every day.
Absolutely.
It's a great place.
It was great.
And that's what I want people to get out of this. Is like, we're not talking shit. That's where I think we wish we were.
Yeah. No,
still.
Yeah. The sex was amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
but we got to grow up.
but at a certain point, you know, you gotta move past that. But look at the actual, there's an actual step. I forget, 7 steps of grief. I forget what it
7.
is. But there's an actual, and you'll see like, oh, well, okay, I'm on that one. And the reason I'm saying that is because if there's anything that anyone takes away, and in my hope from this conversation, it's that highly, more than likely, any and everything that you feel is not unique and weird or weird, or, you know, it's what everyone goes through. And if everyone talked more about what we went through, everyone would realize how there's a pretty definitive set of issues that arise. And I'll end my part on talking about PTSD, because I didn't say this earlier, and I think it's worth mentioning. You know, PTSD has absolutely nothing specifically to do with the military, nor does it specifically have anything to do with combat. It is a term that, quite frankly, you can get from a million different things, from a car accident to being a victim of crime. There's thousands of ways to get legitimate PTSD. And when something means so much, to me, it means very little. So don't let people tell you, you know, do your own research. And that's the key. No different. You got to do your own research. No different than a medical procedure. Look, not every doctor got A's. Some have degrees and they got C's. Like, you have to be your own advocate, your own patient advocate. You have to understand. And it's the same thing with this process. You need to do your own research, make your own conclusions, and educate yourself on how you feel, what you're experiencing. Don't let anyone tell you what it should be.
Right. Yeah. And if you disagree with that, watch the show Dr. Death. If you haven't seen that yet, holy shit. You will investigate every doctor.
I think that's based on the story of that guy that poisoned everyone. Yeah, that's a crazy story.
He was a spinal surgery, and he kept cutting people apart.
Dude,
because he had no knowledge. Anyways.
Yeah.
Well, man, first off, thanks for helping me talk about that in general with people, because it's not a conversation that a lot of people like to have. But I think it's, you know, there's a lot of guys on the fence about being in the military right now, and they want to transition. And if they are thinking about that, I would say study as much as humanly possible. Don't get out and wait to do it. I would put that work in, like you were saying. That is.
Don't get out without a plan.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about, you know, I don't know if it was the regret or something, or like, what do you wish for if you could have had when you were in? It's like, hey, my future self 5 years from now coming in and saying, hey, dude, listen, don't do it yet, you know, and then dump everything on me. I wish I could have had that. And I think by doing the research, which I have done, I wish I'd have done it then.
Absolutely.
And therefore my future self could have helped me. So I think there's that possibility that you and I didn't get. And I had way more opportunity than you did, right? Because you were boom, forced out with medical and getting blown up. So I mean, I mean, you had an opportunity, but you were in a different situation.
Yeah,
Me,
yeah,
I'm just like, I need something else in my life, man. I need another juice. I need something higher. I need another ladder of excellence, a rung to climb, and I'm going to go do that. And then I didn't do the research. And the next thing you know, I'm like, how do I deal with this now? So I think that's important for people.
Yeah. You gotta, at the end of the day, we are all individually responsible for fixing ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to put that that responsibility on organizations, the government. It's well, they got to fix. That's great, and I'm not saying that those organizations or the government or whatever aren't responsible for certain things, but this is a great way to say it. And whatever it is, if it's a mental issue or whatever it is, it may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to fix it.
Yeah.
And no one is going to care more or do more to fix whatever issue it is than you.
Well, you're the one. I use this. I talked about this in another podcast. You are the blade, and you're also the blacksmith. You're the knife maker. So you're pounding and scorching and beating and doing it all over and folding, and you're going through that, which is what is making you a sharper, more polished, beautiful tool in life. And when you could think of it that way, for the way I do, is it's just another pound, it's just another fold, it's just another scorch, it's just another forge. And a lot of people will go, that's not supposed to be like that. So like I was telling you earlier, I lost my 34th friend to suicide 3 weeks ago. And I think every fucking podcast I say that, and it's another number. And it's like, you don't need to do that. That's a part of the forging. So I'd rather you live a long life and tell your grandkids one day of the heroic stories of your brothers and sisters and the crazy shit you did as a kid or whatever, in this 1 in 400 trillion chance we get to become a human being. So why would you end it early? Because you're not okay with the fact that you are the knife maker as well. And a lot of times I think we put blame on organization or other people. The VA, like, I've done it. I've definitely blamed it, and there's good reason to it, certain aspects.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's some shit going on there, and there's great doctors there too. Most of them are volunteers. But don't forget that we manifest our reality.
Absolutely. Would you say with the knife analogy, would you say you're like, like the hammer? Would you say you're like destroying the blade?
Well, I think it takes destruction in order to make something beautiful.
Like self-destruction?
Oh. There you go. I don't know what else to say on that, man. That was fucking awesome.
No, yeah, it's been great.
Well, one last question.
Yeah.
Well, maybe two. What's the future of Tyler Gray coming up here? Anything you can share with us?
I mean, I got a lot of stuff going on. I mean, for me, it's every day is just, you hustle every day, and you never know. I work on, my whole process is every day. I just try and keep, to use a football analogy, every day I just try and move the ball, whether it's an inch or 20 yards. I just keep trying to move the ball every day, and you don't control the timeline. So when something happens, it's out of my control. I just control moving the ball. So there's a lot of things I'm working on, and when and if any of those things happen, it's not under my control. I don't love, for me, it's not about the view from the peak. It's just,
it's climbing
the climb. Yeah, just the climb. The struggle of the climb is the fun. And actually, quite honestly, there's been a couple dreams that have come true recently, and I realized that, what do I do now? It's you push and fight so hard for something, and then it comes true, and you're like,
what the hell do I do with it?
Yeah, you're like, oh, And I mean, there's an answer. It's just dream bigger. But it is kind of a weird moment where you're like, oh, okay, well,
you deserve that, man. You do. You
Well,
deserve that, and I think it's important to be grateful in those times. And I should be taking my own medicine here because I'm the same way, man. You know, I want to go hard and find the next goal when it's like maybe I should just enjoy this for a second. And I haven't been able to do that in my life until in the last year or two that I've been reminded daily by good friends and mentors and help and family to say, hey, enjoy this, man, because it's only once.
I'm with you. I'm working on the enjoying, and again, I still think it's tied to worth. You know,
Okay.
it's like
Yeah.
for me, it's like if I stop and go, oh yeah, I did this and it was good, then it's like, oh, I'm worth it. But if I'm constantly just trying to, if I don't feel worth it, then I have to keep. You know, I fundamentally believe my lack of self-worth is also what's pushed me to achieve things. So it's a weird catch-22. Like, you know, every negative thing the worst things that I can say has happened to me in the last, 20 years have ended up being some of the best things or have led to some of the best things. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to view anything as truly negative or sometimes even truly positive because you never know. But I just try and ignore that and enjoy it. But
Everything in life's a maybe.
on a long enough timeline, everything will change over and over and over again. And nothing is ever what it is. Your perception of it'll change constantly. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, last question. With that climb in your life that you've had, many climbs, right? Can you identify what's the biggest sacrifice Tyler Gray has ever made? What have you given up to get where you are? Because you go a lot. You go hard, man. You do. We all do. But what's something you have truly sacrificed? It's not your arm. That you manifest that because you wanted to be there, right? It's not parts of your brain or your body. It's like, what is there anything that stands out to you that's a true fuck? Wow.
Yeah. I'd say it at one time, at different times, everything. Relationships, friends, family, everything. Like I have, and again, I'll state this right now, like the last two relationships that I had that ended, I mean, I am not the victim of them. Like I sacrificed them. I sacrificed them to get where I wanted to go. And that was part of the healing process for that, is accepting that, yeah, this happened, but why did it happen? Ultimately, it's because I won't let anything stop me.
So, although potentially unwanted, you were a beneficiary to it versus a victim.
Well, I'm saying that, my constant drive for the things that I push for, absolutely pushes, relationships away. I mean, unquestionably, friendships, same thing. Like I pretty much have been on a very selfish path of I'll sacrifice anything to get where I'm trying to go. That being said, I'm honest about it.
Yeah. So is there a balance with that? Does that mean you go, you know what, I'm gonna start balancing that better and also get what I want in life, but also not maybe sacrifice, which is the balance, right? That's hard.
Yeah, that is what I am. That's one of the things that I'm really trying to learn now. That's kind of like I have a new relationship that is absolutely amazing, best thing ever. And now I'm aware of the mistakes I've made in the past, and I'm trying to not repeat, and just be open and say, hey, like, this is my priority. This is this, and lay it all out there. And then,
they're just folds in that knife that remind you to, how do you get to where you want to go? And I've seen the relationship you're in now, man. I think you're going to be doing pretty well with this.
Yeah,
I hope so.
No, I'm happy, but it's one of those things where it comes down to, I'll say this, of all the things that I'm bad at, and there's a lot of them, debatably, balance is probably top 5 things I'm horrible at. Like, I'm 1,000 miles an hour in one direction. And, I used to say this about balance, which is true, but it's a cop-out. But true balance, to be truly balanced, means sometimes being out of balance.
All right.
Yeah, I know.
That makes complete sense, actually. You really, because it keeps looping.
I know.
Which means there's something in the middle.
That's the problem. Again, that's how I justified self-destruction for so long. I'm like,
man.
dude, I'll balance, but if you're just always good balance, like, you need to have negative balance.
Right.
I know. You can
fall. What is learning balance? But
exactly. you can justify anything you want, which, but yeah, no, it's, I'm working on that.
That's awesome, dude. Thank you so much for sharing that, man. And
Absolutely.
everything today. This has been awesome getting to know you. You're incredible, bro. Thanks. And keep
same,
doing,
man.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's been, it's a funny thing when you've known who someone, like, I've known, not you, but I've known who you are for quite some time. And then it's just funny then when you meet that person, and then, you're like, oh man, this person's just like me. It's just funny. And then you're like, shit, I wish I would have met him a long time ago, so, yeah.
Definitely chewed some of the same dirt in certain ways,
Yeah. It's a funny thing how you, once you finally, it's so good to, in this, in the communities that we were a part of, in the military and veterans, everything that we're talking about, I cannot understate the importance of finding like-minded individuals.
Community.
Yeah. And once you find someone that you truly have a similar mindset,
hold it.
Yeah. Hold it and recognize its worth and value.
Yeah.
Because it's rare.
Yeah. Agree, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's do it again.
All right. Absolutely.